Hello, Facebook and YouTube, my personal Facebook friends, and all the friends and followers of Mackenzie Wilson, who is a landlord in Alberta. And he is the founder or co-founder of Alberta Landlord Community. And tonight I have him on because I want this to be a comparison between the RTA in Alberta versus the RTA here in Ontario. And we want you to vote into the comments here and let us know, who do you think has the best Residential and Tenancy Act? And we're going to be able to help you make that decision by firing some questions off to Mackenzie and getting Mackenzie to answer at the best of his knowledge. He's not a paralegal, guys. He's just a landlord, and he's going to talk from his experience. So I'm excited to be able to bring him on tonight, and we have another show lined up tomorrow. So we'll I got a busy week ahead of me, so it's really nice to have Mackenzie on, because I'm telling you guys, you're gonna love what he's created and what he does in the Alberta landlord community. It's phenomenal. It makes my Facebook lives look like boring compared to his Facebook lives, guys. Like, I tell you, I wish he was part of in Ontario. We could have been a dynamite team together. But besides that, I want Mackenzie on here now, and I want him to explain to you guys of who he is. Is he a landlord? Is he he's obviously not a paralegal, but is he a realtor? How many units do you have? Do you have kids? Give us a little bit about Mackenzie first, and then we'll talk about his Alberta landlord community.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Kayla, for the warm intro. I really appreciate it. I'm not as I kind of have a little bit of a different path than probably what Kayla, the way you've taken. I know you've taken a very strong interest in advocating for landlord rights in Ontario, because from an outside perspective over here out west, you guys have a bit of an uphill climb just with your day-to-day rules and legislation that you guys deal with. A little about me, same thing. I got into real estate investing back in end of 2015. And at that point in time, I was looking for what you've already created now with on Ontario Landlords Watch, a support group to answer the day-to-day questions to make the business easier. Because honestly, I think it's one of the more challenging entrepreneurial paths someone could take if they wanted to be self-employed. Because not only do you need a large capital investment to get a rental property up and running, so there's a little bit of risk to managing that and making sure you can keep your bills paid on time. But at the same time, you're balancing the challenging behaviors and the demands of customer service of providing a home to a tenant. And they should be picky because it is their home. But at the same time, how much do you give and take in that whole fine balancing act? And then I think with those two variables at play, it does make it a very challenging business to be in, but also very rewarding when you get it right. So yeah, started in 2015. I've got a beautiful wife, Kayla. We've got two boys.
What's your name?
Kayla.
Oh my God. Guys, we're not married, guys. We're not married.
No. Kayla Wilson out here in Alberta. I forgot to mention that.
Awesome.
Yeah. And two boys, Bone and Jack. Bone is 4 and Jack is 1. And lots of energy. And I'm learning day by day. Yeah, there's so much going on. I know you're going to think of it too. You've got 3 kids?
4.
4, yeah. And I was like,
16, 11, 7, and 1. When you have to look up and count like their age, like, you got too many kids, right?
Definitely. Well, it's, I hear after 3, it kind of just, you can like outsource the daily tasks of the household to the oldest, and it gets a little bit easier. I don't know. I'm at 2 and I find it challenging enough. So good for you.
Yeah, I'm thankful for my mother-in-law, and without her, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. So it's like her birthday's tomorrow, so tomorrow is going to be crazy, but I still got to squeeze in that Facebook Live at the same time. Now, Mackenzie, do you work full-time as well, or is it real estate your financial freedom?
I do, yeah. So real estate right now is as a part-time side hustle, if you will. My day job, I do IT, and I work for a telecom called TELUS, which I'm sure some of you guys have heard of.
Nice, nicely done. Now you get discounts?
A little bit, yeah.
Had to throw that in there. Can you get discounts for us down here, like at all?
I don't think you guys get our TELUS TV. I know you guys got obviously our mobility down there, but there's kind of like this line drawn in the sand that Bell and Rogers, they have out east, and then TELUS and Shaw stays out west.
Now, what made you want to be so involved with the and join into the Alberta landlord community up there? Because I think that your segments, your videos, your content, I find it very that's why like I found you, and I'm like, I love these people. Like they're giving me all the information that I need. And if anyone in Ontario is looking at trying to invest, I highly suggest that you join Alberta Landlord Community. And we'll get the link hopefully when you got some time here, Mackenzie, and we'll put it into this chat after we're done, and let people know what how to find you, because I know a lot of our landlords are fed up in Ontario, and this is why I wanted you on tonight so that we can do that. Now, how many members do you have right now into the Alberta Landlord Community?
We're a little over 2,500.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's what it is. It's about sticking together and being united and being able to help one another through the day-to-day operations. And that's what we've accomplished over and over again with Ontario Landlords Watch. And I'm glad to see that we have something in Alberta doing the exact same thing, because we were too quiet before, I think.
Well, yeah. And going back to, why or how I got into it, I'm just want to put this in a nice 30-second pitch here. But, I found out after talking as part of some real estate investing circles, doing networking and learning from more experienced landlords and investors how they're progressing through the game of collecting and building up real estate rental properties. And I learned on quickly, because my biggest fear when I first got in was a professional tenant and not be able to pay a mortgage bill and having a property damage and being in financial ruins and all that. That just scared the daylights out of me. So my goal was just to learn as much as possible to turn a weakness into a strength. So I did courses, I do read blogs, forums, all these different things on how to screen tenants and find really good tenants. Because you can have the perfect property with all the right amenities close to the university or close to transit, whatever your niche you're focused in on. But if the tenant's not paying rent at the end of the day, doesn't matter how good that property is, you're not making money. So my biggest focus was just doing the due diligence up front to find those really great tenants. So I got proficient at that, and didn't really know until I had a conversation with an investor that had over 100 doors. I really looked up to him. And then I started showing him my process one time. We're sitting down after a real estate conference. He goes, "Holy cow, you do all that?" I'm like, wait a minute, you don't do this? And then there's like a light bulb at that point in time. And then, so shortly after I realized I was doing things a bit differently, I started a YouTube channel about screening tenants. And I realized, I think to this date, I mean, that was last year, I think I'm still the only person that has a channel dedicated only to finding and screening tenants. And that led me into this Facebook group that I'm a part of now. And the co-founder over there is Chris Noble. And we met, and we kind of had really similar values and beliefs of wanting to help people in this challenging business. And then that's where Alberta Landlord Community was born from.
That is awesome. And I know, like, we always have our tips that we want to trade, and we're always afraid to tell it, because sometimes we do come across the tenants who are going to like, oh, that's how they screen. Okay, well, this is what I got to do now to get around that and this and this. And I'm like, okay, let's step it back a bit. Let's keep that in our private groups. And I'm glad you guys have that. So if anyone is interested in joining Alberta Landlord Community with Mackenzie here, you can put in that you found out about them through OLW. He is going to screen you just like we do in our group. So make sure, hopefully we have mutual friends, because that's going to be a trigger to let you guys in there. But I'm sure that you'll get in sooner rather than later. And Mackenzie would love to have some Ontario investors who are looking at Alberta as a potential. So before you think about, potentially wanting to become an Alberta investor, let's get to know about the RTA. It's like game show right now. You ready? Ding ding. Okay. Number one, I have a question for you. What is your protocol for a standard lease? Do you have a standard lease? Let's say, tell us about when you're getting a tenant inside of your unit. What's that protocol? What do you do?
Right. So I'll answer the first part of that question. And leases, as we can write our own lease here in Alberta. There's a few factors that need to be a part of that lease, the variables that can't be changed. And if I'm quoting this right off the top of my head, if there's a mistake between this lease and the RTA shall prevail, meaning that if you contradict the Residential Tenancy Act here in Alberta, the act overrules your lease. But beyond that, we can put generally what we want in our leases. So do we have a standard lease? No, but there are associations out there that provide a really good foundation to start from. And I usually suggest with landlords starting there. I know when I first got in the game, I got a really complex, just pages and pages of a lease, and I couldn't explain it. And I looked really silly in front of the tenants the first couple of times I was putting tenants in. So I actually ditched it. I went to a simplified lease, got comfortable with it. And then over time, I've added lessons learned, and then hearing stories of other landlords and what they're doing. I've taken, the best of the best over time and built up to where I'm at now for a lease.
And that's where we have our standard lease, and it does give the education more so on the tenant side of it. It does give us a structure, but if we're adding addendums, and again, with that same policy, if it doesn't follow suit with the Residential and Tenancy Act, then it doesn't apply. And that's the part where it's like, if that's the case, why did they make us pay, the price and have the standard lease and doing updates to the standard lease? It just becomes a more complicated situation, and it could result, the changes in leases, it could result in potentially having cases thrown out in our landlord and tenant board. So that is why, they should just allow us to be adults and understand that here's a contract, here's the landlord that's going to explain it to you, and the tenant is an adult and they're going to be able to sign it. So I love the fact that you guys have your full power on being able to get your own standard lease. Now that you have a standard lease and you're getting your tenancy involved, can you, do you take first and last month's rent?
No, so that's definitely an Ontario thing, and we occasionally get the tenants that come over and they ask for that, and they're like, no, it doesn't work that way. So what we do is you collect the damage deposit, and you can collect first month's rent in advance. If you collect the damage deposit and let's say last minute that tenant backs out for whatever reason, by law you have to return that damage deposit here in Alberta. What we do to get around that is we'll collect a deposit against first month's rent first, and then at some point before I give over possession, I also want to have that damage deposit in my bank account. What will happen is if a landlord's not being kind of prudent on these steps, and perhaps they're being a little bit friendly and they let that tenant in, once that tenant's in and they haven't collected a security deposit or damage deposit, the words are kind of interchangeable here, you no longer can collect that in Alberta. So you want to make sure you have that before they move in, else you've missed your boat on that. But if you go and collect first month's rent and they back out, 2 days before lease signing and the move-in date, you can keep a portion of that to compensate yourself for lost time, because now you're probably going to run a vacancy for the next couple of weeks to find your next replacement for that tenant.
So you get to keep a portion of the damage or the first month's rent?
First month's rent, damage deposit has to be refunded. But if you collect a deposit against first month's rent, then you're in a place you can keep some of those funds.
Not too bad, not too bad. I know we're all crying for damage deposits down here, and I say, okay, if we ask for that, then something might happen to our last month's rent. But sometimes our last month rent doesn't mean squat in Ontario anymore, because our tenants are able to stay around for about 12 months without paying rent. Well, so that's my next question for you.
Let's talk about it.
How does the non-payment of rent happen? So you got a tenant in there, they paid first in their damage deposit, and then they stopped paying you completely. How does it work?
Yeah, so let's play a few different scenarios here. So if we're just talking straight non-payment to rent, assuming you've done your documentation up front, you've gotten good documentation that's clear, showing the tenant not paying the rent, you can go and file for a 14-day notice.
What do you mean document?
So I meant like you've had email exchanges saying, hey, Mr. Tenant, today's the first. If I haven't collected rent by the end of the day, you are in default, you're late, you owe me X amount. Like just good conversations, and all your conversations are in written form, emails, texts, phone calls, all that stuff's documented well. So if you have to go down to the and we have two ways to solve disputes. There's more the formal route, which is the provincial court system. Typically, larger cases will go there up to a value of $50,000, or we have a less formal route that's more streamlined for small claims, and that's through the RTDRS, if I remember the acronym correctly, and it's Residential Tenancy Dispute Resolution Service. And majority of us go through that. And right now, because of COVID, it's actually improved our situation. So before COVID, those had to be done in person. You'd have to get your slotted time, and depending on how busy things could be anywhere from a week up to maybe 6 to 7 weeks that you'd be waiting for your date. But since COVID and the whole changing of the way the world works, I know I have to give a lot of kudos to our provincial government and the folks in the positions that govern us as landlords. They streamlined it. Everything can be submitted digitally online. There's no in-person interaction whatsoever, and everything's done over a phone call. So because of that, we had turnarounds that could be measured in hours. So if someone would submit a case on a Monday, they'd have their hearing Wednesday morning. So I don't know where we're at right now. It varies again depending on what the workload is, and because that they've done this system where it's all virtual now, and the hearings are done over phone calls or conference calls. If Calgary's really busy, they'll have some mediators up in Edmonton take some of the workload off of Calgary and get those cases through the system much quicker. So I mean, and I like you're telling me right now, you guys still have actual lockdowns still in place that you can't evict, which is, I am mind blown to hear that, and that scares the living lights out, scares the living daylights out of me, because like I could not imagine being in a position of 9, 12 plus months not collecting anything. That would destroy most small landlords. Like that's just not feasible.
So if you have your tenant not paying on the first of the month, you have that correspondence back and forth, and then by what day are you applying to the courts?
So if it's a first occurrence, you're probably going to need to build up your case, because if you just go right to submit for a case to go to RTDRS for one late payment, they're going to side with the tenant. They're like, you know what, Mr. Tenant had a rough time. We'll make a payment plan with him and go from there. So what I say by making the paperwork, we don't have to use the 14-day notice of eviction. It's only there where basically it's like a tool to build up your evidence. So you issue a 14-day notice, say, hey, Mr. Tenant, you're in default or breach of the lease for non-payment, for damages, for whatever they're in breach of, right? You want to list everything. And you want to do that a couple times to show that, you know, this tenant has a track record of not paying in time. Then you actually have a case and a reasonable expectation that, you know, this tenant is not going to pay rent again. Then you want to go for eviction. So let's say, you know what, you're at a position where you have the right documentation in place and you're going to file. You could go file for an eviction on the spot. I'm forgetting the right paperwork terminology, because I don't do the day-to-day stuff with the paperwork, but you can go and file it and get your case. And then depending on how fast that hearing comes up, like I said, it's sometimes the turnarounds within days. I think right now lead time's probably about 5 to 10 business days to get your hearing, and then have that hearing. And if you win it, depending on what you request in that hearing, right? So if you want the tenant out within 72 hours because they're destroying the place, they're flooding it, they're doing really atrocious behavior, you'll probably get that granted. If it's like a first time occurrence and it's just late rent and
they'll work a payment plan and try to stretch it out and kind of work with them. But so if you give this paperwork to the tenant, and let's say that they're great on, normally they're not really paying all the time. So if you try to see that how long would a tenant get away with not paying rent? Like, is it 2 months before?
If you're organized, so it, you know, what I will work with it, like me personally, and I think I speak probably for a good handful of the landlords. If a tenant has got good communication up front and they said, hey, you know, Mr. Landlord, I can't make it this month's rent. Can I split across my next 2 pay periods, like 1,500 or whatever the numbers are? Sure, go ahead. It's when that communication breaks down, and if you've already gone as a landlord and make payment arrangements, because we are still kind of in this difficult time with the pandemic, the courts and RTDRS want to see that. So that's part of the documentation. So I'm going to make the assumption here, you're going to probably have to have a couple challenging 2 to 3 months of missed rent or late rent, and then there's your track record, and at that point you can go and file right away.
2 to 3 months.
I think like you got to build it, but like the
longest eviction you think of kicking out a non-paying tenant is 2 to 3 months from the start of the communication.
If you don't bugger up your paperwork and you're like, as soon as that, so the rent's due on the first, on the second, if I haven't received anything, depending on that relationship with that tenant, if they've given me a heads up or not, let's say they're not, and I don't know what's going on, you should be, as a landlord, your best practice is to file that paperwork right in the second. That starts that 14-day eviction notice, which in Alberta is actually 16 days. You have to have a clear day before and after the 14 days. So really the full turnaround 16 days to start that process. And if the tenant goes and makes right on that eviction notice, so an eviction notice can be for, you know, missing rent, missing utilities, non-payment, late damages. But if you just say we're just doing an eviction for non-payment, and they go within 14 days and pay it, then they just nullify that 14-day notice, and you're back to business as usual.
Okay.
So usually what we try to go ahead.
And if they don't fix their behavior, if they don't pay, then they could be kicked out within 72 hours.
Then you go and apply for your RTRS hearing, which is the quickest of the two processes right now. And depending how fast that process turns around, you can have them out right at, within, let's say there's reason to grant an immediate eviction because you think, you say, you built your case and you think, Mr. Adjudicator, I think he's going to damage my property. I'd like to have him out within this period of time, say 3 days. It's all based on the circumstances of your situation. So if it might be just non-payment or rent, and you've already tried doing a payment plan, then they're gonna probably still give another payment plan at that hearing. But if you've got someone to represent yourself, or you represent yourself well, you make part of that payment plan the conditions. If they fail to pay one more time, then you start the eviction. And that eviction could be you're out in 5 days, depending whatever you and whatever is agreed upon at that hearing. So it will vary based on the situation.
Our landlords are waiting 12 months for a hearing and then say, okay, you're getting a standard order, which you have to wait 11 days, but you have to wait 11 days from when the order actually gets stamped in order. Oh my God, I'm so jealous.
Yeah, well, we often have this conversation because we'll have, so we do a talk show every Wednesday. It's 7 o'clock Mountain Time, so 9 o'clock your guys' time. We have a panel of landlords, and we just pick questions off the book. We talk about things, and often I definitely, like, for an outside perspective, I say, you know what, guys, some of the things you're complaining about don't really make a lot of sense. You just maybe need to be a little more diligent on your process and your paperwork and what you're doing, because look across the board.
You can put everything on that form, so it's not like it's one form for payment, one for damages.
Nope, it's just an eviction, and then the eviction has to have your substantial breaches, and those breaches could be anything. So, and best practice would be to put all of your breaches in at once, because if you really want that tenant out because they're difficult or for whatever reason, and they start paying rent, well, and you only put rent as the reason for eviction, well, they've nullified that eviction notice. But if you put damages, eviction, illegal pet, they didn't non-approved pet, all this stuff, you can catch them on all of that, and then they paid the rent on time, but that doesn't matter. They still did these other 3 breaches, they're out.
Okay, let's get in. I'm gonna have you on again because I swear I just love our Alberta, every sentence that you're speaking here. Okay, so now we got a non-payment. Obviously, if you guys vote, I don't know if you guys are commenting on Facebook. If you are, try to click on the link so that we can see you in the live stream here.
We see one post right now, and someone says they're going to be joining the group. So yeah, welcome to the community. I'll definitely invite you in, Facebook user, as the name's showing up. But yeah, just for context, I think from the most challenging tenant-focused jurisdictions, I don't know which is worse, if it's you guys or if it's British Columbia, but I'm sure it's a 2-horse race. I would say probably out of all the provinces, and I don't know the Maritimes. I'm not really familiar with the territories or Manitoba, but Saskatchewan's pretty similar to us. There are some nuances that are different as well. But I would say we're probably the most even-keeled jurisdiction out there, where it's both, if you're a good tenant, you're going to win. If you're a good landlord, you're going to win, and vice versa. It should hammer the person if they've been ill intent. So.
And that's where it is. That's where it's like for the overall of Canada, and from the East Coast to the BC and Ontario are deemed to be the most. They love to look at each other as province elected officials. They love to work together and see what they're doing, and they try to adopt it here. And it's like, okay, I think Ontario needs to become their own person and stop trying to play copycat with the other provinces, because BC is a mess as well. So I'm glad to see that. So 100%. Now we'll see for non-payment of rent, guys. If you comment, if you're listening live, or even as it's on replay. So we have Ontario and Alberta. So I'm going to guess Alberta takes the non-payment of rent. That's my opinion. Put that in the notes and give me your thoughts.
Well, let's talk about rent increases. I would love to know how that works for you guys. I can give you mine in about 30 seconds, and you guys are going to probably, jaw will hit the floor, but I'll be happy to clarify. Do you want me to talk about mine first?
Yeah, because ours sucks, and we'll ruin the mood if we talk about it.
All right. Well, I'm going to learn, because I don't.
Yours?
What's that? Sorry?
you happy with the way that your rent increases go?
I absolutely love it because it's fair and it's by the book, and it works very, very well. So we don't have rent controls. So flat out, we can raise the rents any amount. Now, in saying that, the market will dictate what rent you can charge. So on a termed contract or a fixed contract, let's say yearly, for example, you cannot raise a rent more than once every 365 days here in Alberta. But when we go to raise rent, we can raise it, 10%, $10, $200, $300, $400, whatever, right? It depends what the market's willing to pay. And on the flip side, though, when we had we've been dealing with some pretty challenging markets over the last 5 to 6 years. We had a big recession in the oil patch. We saw rents decrease between 10 to up to 40% in some cases. So people had to make some serious cutbacks. So I just want to, I guess, provide that, because a lot of tenants will say, "Oh, rent only ever go up, 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 up." Well, no, not when the free market works the way it does. It goes both ways because it depends what's going on in the market. So
that's why we've always really tried to emphasize to our elected officials that capping landlords at a 2.5%, and that's only if they allow that 2.5%. They will justify, oh, it's 1.5 this year. Oh, it's 1.8 this year. And lovely for us this year, 2021, landlords in Ontario are not allowed to even increase their rate to the 1.5 or the 1.8 or whatever they were actually thinking about giving us. Now, for you, because of COVID, are you still allowed to do rent increases?
So we had a what would be the right word? A lockdown period, if you will, when it was back. So if I recall the time frame correctly, I'm going off the top of my head, I want to say it was probably April, May, and June. We were in a state where, for the first time ever, I believe in Alberta history, rents couldn't be raised, people couldn't be kicked out, and payment plans were a legal requirement, meaning that before you could do any kind of eviction or start the eviction process, there had to be a payment plan made, and it had to be done in good faith. So I'll throw a caveat there. So for 3 months we couldn't raise rents, we couldn't evict people, and payment plans were a requirement. Now, during that entire process, you could still file. If you had a tenant that was destroying your property, you could still file and get yourself queued up for the end of that period. And that's what people were doing. So there was definitely a backlog after end of June when our shutdown stopped. But
wow,
yeah, just a very, very different world.
And you think with housing being what it is in Canada today, that they would have something more consistent than having so many different changes that from province to province. Mm-hmm. So that comes to my next question. So if you have a tenant that is late, can you charge a late fee?
You can. Now, generally, if it depends again where it goes, but if it goes to RTDRS or it goes to the court systems, they don't look very favorably on it, and they'll probably just disregard it, and they'll just say, you can't do that. But it's kind of the approach we kind of take is there's nothing in our RTA or legislation that says you can't do it. But do you typically get that granted in your favor? Typically not. It typically goes into the benefit of the tenant if you go through the court system or you go and have a case to be heard. But in saying that, most times it doesn't go to the case, so tenants they pay it. Yeah, you can. Yeah, they'll pay the late fee.
What kind of late fee would you charge?
So I have it at $20 a day for every day that the rent is late. Have I actually ever used that? No, I've had rent. One tenant has been late here and there, but they've always been very good at communicating up front, saying, "Hey, by the way, I know I'm going to have difficulties. Can I do this?" And the fact that they're making the effort and keeping me the communication good, I'm always okay with that. And then I've had twice where tenants either missed or forgot, and I remind them I got paid within 24 hours, so I didn't charge anything.
So now let's say that tenant's not paying, you have to do some late fees. Obviously, they're not paying that, and you do have to go to the courts. What's the cost for Alberta landlords to file it at the two different type of ways to address these disputes?
Yeah, for sure. So I know RTDRS right now is about $75 filing fee, and then you just got to do $75, and then you can even serve right now. If there's precedent set on what normal communication is, like i.e. you've been communicating on a regular basis through email, through Facebook, through text, you can actually digitally just serve the tenant on that same communication method.
You can serve your tenant through Facebook?
Yeah, Facebook Messenger for sure. If they've been communicating the entire time, you've done all your.
I hope you guys are listening to this show tonight, guys. This is mind blowing. I feel like Mackenzie's lying to me, but I had the RTA up, and you know what, guys? He's telling the truth. Like, I think we're pulling out at Ontario and coming into Alberta. I wonder what Doug Ford would think about our housing market.
This is a new area for us, right? This is all post pandemic, pre-pandemic, before that ever happened. We couldn't do this, so it's set a new table for us, and it's still a bit of a gray area, but they're now, just because of the whole COVID and not wanting to be in person, they're allowing it pretty regularly. But I mean, our RTA legislation, if to what they're allowing us to do right now, is a little bit dated, and from a law perspective, you still have to do the traditional, tape the notice to the door. It has.
No, see, I told you the government's not happy with the way that we're sharing this information about Alberta. Hold on, Mackenzie.
I got you now.
Okay. Whoa. I tell you, I think Facebook's watching what we're doing right now. They don't want they don't want to lose our landlords in Ontario to Alberta. Okay. So I don't know how much we missed there, but I just want to be able to regurgitate. So we got 75 for the one level of filing. And then if you need to go to the more higher end of the court, what is that one?
I don't know. I haven't done it. I believe there's a little bit more of a cost. And then depending, because it's the provincial courts, the Queen's Bench, there's different representation requirements as well. Typically, you need a lawyer, so there's a lot more costs as well that route. So, so it's I don't know the fee though for it.
Okay, yeah. So, but if everything's working with the $75 filing fee, why go a little further ahead, right?
Yeah, like the give a comparison. If you go down the provincial court route, you've got a judge. They're very well trained within the eyes of the law. They're very black and white, and I think they're a very fair representation if you've got a good case that warrants going that path. The RTDRS, they're very good for very common issues, but they're I'm not sure if I'm using the right word. I'm going to call them mediators, the folks that do these hearings. They're not trained at the same standard of levels as a lawyer or a judge. So that comes with their experience, but you still get very. I know there's a few times where maybe the law wasn't applied fairly, but honestly, for the volume of cases they do a very good job.
And you have a tenant that refuses to move out after you've brought them and you get an order for them to evict. How does that eviction process work? Can a tenant apply for a stay, for a review? Like, is there a way for them to drag out the sheriff or the bailiff? Is that what you guys call it there, to evict them?
Yeah. So they can contest. They can, what's the right word? File a, objection. I think I'm using the right word. And if you're not on top of your paperwork, they can try disputing that. So they can possibly drag it out if the paperwork's not done right or you're not on top of it. But if you've got a strong case, they object it. You just go back 2 days later or however fast the turnaround is, and then it gets thrown out, and then you move on, right? So it possibly
around time.
A professional tenant will add a little bit of time, but if you've got a solid case, you can still mitigate most of the delays. And so then if you have to have a physical presence to do the actual eviction and take back possession, that's done through a bailiff, which I think is this. I don't know if that's the same for you guys, but it's we just had a bailiff join our group, and I listened to the show. I'm trying to remember his notes, how he explained it. They are licensed or registered through the province, but they're separate from the police force. So that's who you'd have to hire if you need to physically take back your property for possession.
And there's no wait time for the bailiff there to enforce these type of evictions. Like, they run pretty smoothly.
Yeah, I mean, it probably depends on if they're busy or not. But I mean, for example, we have Servit here in out of Calgary and actually up on Edmonton as well. And Brad was on there. And he was talking. And he said, you know what? Sometimes they're probably running 2 to 3 days in advance. But once you get your paperwork, that's probably the same lead time you get anyways for your eviction date. So you can have the day it strikes 12 noon when you get your possession back, you should have no problem having a bailiff there at the same time and enforcing it if you've gone and phoned a few days before.
Are they private bailiffs? Like it's a private company, or are they actually
private company? But I believe they're regulated through the province, if I'm making the right interpretation here.
That is awesome. Oh my God. I'm getting so excited. Now, I know that we're almost coming to our time here, so we'll probably fire some of these off and
let's do rapid fire to see how much I can answer for you guys.
Now we got like everyone's like jealous right now about your house serving of your documents right now. We're like, we can't even get email right now in Ontario. So we're completely in awe right now tonight. Thank you, Mackenzie, for being able to come on and do that to us. Another one, tenants move into into your unit, and on your lease that you put, it gives you who is going to be in your unit. What if it's a 1-bedroom apartment and all of a sudden they move, another person in, but you only rent it to that one individual? Can you get that tenant evicted for moving other people into the rental unit without your permission?
That would be a breach of your lease. Again, depends how you write your lease. So if you've got a properly written lease and you only rent to the person on lease that's on title, and you might have a section that says are there allowed to be other occupants, if so, that are staying more than 2 weeks, what are their names? But let's just say you've got a proper lease and someone's moved in, so it's an unauthorized person or tenant, file for eviction and follow the same process.
And you can kick everybody out.
You can have that person removed, and then if that person refuses or your current tenant refuses, then they're in breach as well, and then proceed with the same process to have them evicted.
Okay, can you sign me up to all of your rental properties that are coming available in Alberta?
I mean, you guys, I like from a economy and from an economy standpoint, you guys got it amazing. You've got great immigration, you've got a very diverse economies across Ontario, but then the legislation that follows that, you guys got so many rules that stifles people wanting to take the risk to build more supply, which I think is part of the reason why you guys are in the position you're in with just really bad legislation. Rent controls also is a big scaring factor from investors. So all of a sudden, you're growing, great demand, great influx in immigration, but your supply is just down here. And now you've gotten these rent controls to make it even worse. And I actually believe the rent controls actually do the opposite of the intended effect.
Oh, 100%. And you know what? Sometimes when you look at the supply and demand and how the government now forces private individuals to work for the government, so you're pretty much a social agency for the government with no compensation. That's how it's gotten here in Ontario, where you are not even appreciated as an investor, and they don't even allow you to try to be an investor at ease. Not only with the RTA and the LTB, but municipal policies that really strangle an investor from wanting to create more units with all the different type of municipal policies. Now, I had a question too regarding, I know it's really big around here. So what about pet deposits? Can you charge a pet deposit? What happens with that? Because we know I know we have great pets. It's just their owners that are irresponsible.
So we can attack the whole pet fee or compensation standpoint from a number of different ways. So if you're going to go for a refundable deposit, you certainly can charge that. The total amount of your pet deposit, including the damage deposit, cannot exceed 1 month's rent. So that's your cap. You can't go above that. But we can also charge non-refundable fees. So you can do both a $250, $350 upfront non-refundable fee plus an ongoing $20, $30, $50 a month, whatever you want to charge as a pet fee, just for having that luxury of having a pet with you, because it is a luxury. It's not a right.
Woo, buddy. Oh my God. Okay. Error paperwork. I think we touched a little bit based on that. If you had an error and it goes on to an actual hearing through the phone, how do they handle that? Do they just throw it out and you got to file again, or do they kind of fix it at that time?
Yeah, so I have personally not been down this route, but from what I heard and how they've handled cases, when we talk about other landlords and their problems they're going through, I believe common sense is generally used. So for example, I've seen where someone does a one-term lease, and by the way, in Alberta, you always want to do fixed terms over month to month, and we can talk about that after this question. And let's say they go, it's from June 1st, 2020 to May 30th or end of May 2021. But if they put 2020 again because they just got their years mixed up and they put the same year twice, I mean, and it's written as a 12-month lease with the right months, but the 1 year is wrong, they'll probably just correct that because no one's going to move in and move out within 24 hours. That doesn't make sense. But it probably depends on the type of written error. If it's just clerical, they probably just correct it and move on. But if it's something that will affect the like a rule that you've written to your lease that isn't written properly, it'll probably get thrown out. But I'm going to say leave it to the judgment of the hearing officer. Okay. So like just typical typos that are easy, like there are clear, will probably just be like, okay, that's all right. It doesn't really affect the lease. Let's move on. But if it's something like that completely changes the rule to make it inappropriate or something like that, then you're going to probably have more problems there. So
if we had like a rent of $11.75 and you put $11.85, would that throw it out?
And if they sign it, no, that wouldn't throw it out.
Okay.
That means you've been charging $10 less every month, and the tenant's been. Because what will happen is precedents will set. So if you've been collecting $1,075 for 3 months or 4 months in a row, tenant's been paying that, and no one's complained about anything, and then all of a sudden there's $10 more on the lease, then that's not a problem.
Okay, we're going to try to finish off here tonight because I kept you long enough. And I know I don't even know if you ate supper, and I know your wife came in wondering how long you're going to be. And I don't want to.
We're organizing some supper on the fly, but all good. I got a little more time here.
So N12 notices in Ontario is when the landlord takes over the rental unit for their own personal use. We're struggling right now because of the backlog at the landlord and tenant board. Sales are happening where landlords are getting fed up wanting to get out of the business or move into their rentals, and they can't even get their non-paying tenant out of the unit while they're still trying to take over that property as their own personal use or for the new owner to take it over for their personal use. How does that work? Is that it's not like a breach of their tenancy? How would you get control of your unit to move back into it in Alberta?
Okay, so I'll rephrase it. We're talking about ending tenancies, and a tenancy with the tenant.
Okay.
Yeah. One, I don't envy you guys at all. I sympathize. It's just.
Are you crying for us right now?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm thankful I'm out west and I've got some mountains and some different jurisdiction to play with. But so let's talk fixed term. I noted earlier. If it's very prudent as a landlord here in Alberta to do fixed term only, because fixed term is exactly that. It's fixed term. When it ends in 12 months, there's no reason you don't have to technically give notice to the tenant. They're out. That's because it's a contract. It's the binding agreement, which blows my mind in BC. I think you guys might be the same, that you guys could write fixed term, but that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean wow. It blows my mind. But anyways, so in saying that though, we definitely recommend good communication. Give that tenant heads up because hey, if they have to move, they got to pack and find a place, and that takes time, right? So we usually say we definitely always say give proper communication with your tenancy, but a fixed term does not require any reason to terminate. If it ends on a date and you choose not to renew, that's it. That's why we don't do month to month, because month to month requires a legitimate reason to have that tenant out, and now you're giving more power control over your rental property to the tenant because you need that reason. And let's see if I can go off the top of my head here. So they have to be month to month to end a month to month tenancy. You have to have a family member moving in the property, substantial renovations. You want to sell the property. That's 3. I think I'm missing 1 or 2 more. But reasons like that to end a month-to-month tenancy. So if you don't have those reasons and the tenant is paying rent on time and doesn't want to move, it would be difficult to get them out.
You're like literally the opposite of our crap.
It sounds like it, yeah.
It's complete because we go month to month, because even when you put yourself on a year lease, we still can't evict them for personal use until that 12-month time frame is almost done. And then you got the other of the month to month, which they still get 60 days notice, but you still have to give them justified reasons why you want to remove them anyway. So it's never fixed term. And that's why we're so upset, because even on our standard lease, we'll talk about like a fixed term and we're like, yeah, it doesn't do nothing. Even when you try to put someone in a yearly lease and they leave after a month, you know, you got to show reasonable efforts to try to re-rent that unit in order to try to charge that tenant for the full lease agreement in itself. So it's a bunch of BS, really.
Man, like you guys are like playing Super Mario on expert level, and we're just have it on easy. It is very different. I mean, like I said, I think the legislation is very pragmatic. It rewards just good behavior, and it's very balanced. It's not one way or the other. And I think we're very fortunate to be in that position. Again, our RTRS is well ahead of the game, especially compared to what you guys are doing. Where we've actually improved since of COVID, and you know, on a pro tip, you know, we often get the question on the page, you know, I'm stuck month to month for whatever reason. I allowed a term lease to elapse. I didn't do the eviction. I've been still collecting rent. Now I've precedence. It's gone month to month. What you could do is, so month to month would be a privilege as with the way we look at, because that tenant now has more control when they move out. Well, if they want to have that flexibility in their living arrangements, they should pay a premium. So then what we would do is, then here you give the tenant two options on renewal. Mr. Tenant, I'll give you you have to give a 90-day notice to raise rent on month to month, assuming the rent again hasn't been raised once in the last 365 days. And if you go back and say, Mr. Tenant, you can stay a month to month, but you're paying now a $350 premium over market rates, or you can go over just to a termed fixed lease for a 1-year contract, and your rent will be at market price. And then typically the tenant goes, well, I don't want to pay $300 extra a month. I'm going to go back over to the term lease. And that's usually how we fix the situation.
We always knew Ontario sucked. And then after sitting here tonight, I'm realizing I shouldn't have gotten a green tea, that I should have had some liquor in here to understand that we really do suck in Ontario, that our members are even going, how can a landlord from Ontario invest in Alberta? So if you have anybody who can send our Ontario landlords some rental properties available in Alberta, I think you got some Torontonians coming.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I will be going back right now. I'm not directly affected. I'm kind of on a pause, but I'm always looking to talk to investors as well, and get in the page, get to know the local folks, and see who's doing what, and speaks well in the business. And there's lots of great people in Alberta doing good things.
That's awesome. And Mackenzie, because I love Landlord Credit Bureau so much, you have Landlord Credit Bureau in your group as well.
Yep.
Tell me your thought process, because I love talking about them. I love the system. I love that protection and that sense of security that they give, and that consequence that they give to the tenants who just try to abuse the system, especially here in Ontario. How does it fall in for Alberta landlords?
Yeah, no, and that's how Kayla, you and I got connected, was through our contacts over at Landlord Credit Bureau. I went and approached them last summer, got them to be a partner on our page. We got a similar discount set up as well, and it is a very powerful tool that gives the ability that most large banks, car loans, any financial products I've had for some time, they give them that ability to a small mom and pop landlord to damage credit, which is a phenomenal tool. It's part of my screening process, because I will tell them up front, hey, I will help you build your credit, and vice versa. If you have ill intent or you plan not to pay rent, I will also damage your credit. And I don't generally deal with professional tenants in my application process because of all the filters up front that are done. And it's a very powerful tool. And even to the point now, we even have a bit of a strategy how to use the service, because you can go without even filing at RTRS or going through a provincial court. If you've got in your contracted lease, rents, utilities, garage storage, parking fees, whatever, all those fees, and that if some of that's missed, because you already have a contract in place, you can go straight to LCB, file a what do you call that? I can forget the right name right now. Put a record on their credit score.
Yeah. So you get a trade line.
Trade line. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. You can register a trade line. So $40 for the free membership, 10 for the premium membership. And that will stick there until that tenant goes to use your credit for something in the future. And you know what? The biggest objection I hear is you can't squeeze blood from a stone. Well, guess what? That tenant won't be a deadbeat there entirely. Well, at least I don't think they will. Most won't, some probably will, but most probably won't. So at some point in the future, when they get their act together and they realize they need the credit to go make a house purchase or get a car for a job or for work, and that trade line's sitting there, they're going to be giving you a phone call and getting it fixed right away. And so I always tell landlords, so depending if it's something that you already have contract in your lease, don't even file. Just go straight to collect. Go do a trade line with LCB. It's $10 to $40, super cheap. And then if you're in an unfortunate position where, let's say you've got $2,000 worth of damage, you only have $1,000 damage deposit, pull the first $1,000 off your damage deposit because you have those funds, and then file the other $1,000 as a trade line against the as a trade line. And then the way you do that is once you get your judgment from going through the whichever court process you choose to use.
See, yeah, that's the part that a lot of people are getting confused, thinking that you do need a judgment when you're reporting to Landlord Credit Bureau. And we're like, no, like, I don't know why you look at the legal framework on their website. You talk about it with the privacy commissioner, like this is legit stuff where we need to do it. And I love the concept that you brought up about the tenant screening, because when I'm working our concept into opening the door, when you here's your lease and here is your application. Look, that's awesome. Yeah, you get the application.
Oh, I'm on TV. Say hi.
Hi. How are you?
You say hi?
This is very family oriented. I love
it. Hi. So yeah, it just it basically comes down to that damage is subjective, right? So you can't just go and say, my carpets are worth this, and they have this life expectancy. They require that paperwork, which is that judgment through your local court process. That's where you need that paperwork if you want to file for damages. But anything that's contract in your lease and that has not been paid for, you already have the contract and the paperwork. Just file, and you can do that trade line right away.
No, that is awesome. That's what we have to, and again, you talk about that trade line, and that they're eventually gonna, want credit or to get another rental unit, and the landlords are doing credit checks, but it's mostly because you're warning other landlords. You're warning other landlords about who to go for, and you're giving that review section of it, and that's why it's very important for us to be joined together as not only landlords in your one province, but now we're connected to your province because we're now all using that service. So if they try to skip out, we're still finding them through being united as Landlord Credit Bureau. And that's why I think it's phenomenal. And I got more exciting news coming up in the next couple of days regarding Landlord Credit Bureau. I have to share with our members. So it's going to be really nice. And I know we have a lot of members that are going to be interested in finding out more, because I think we're only hitting the tip of what it's like to invest into Alberta. And I can't thank you enough to be able to come on tonight and share us a little tidbit of what's happening. And what kind of tips, before you leave, what kind of tips for any landlord in Ontario, or maybe some tenant screening tips? What kind of tenant screening tips do you have?
Sure. So in this day and age, we're very information driven, right? You've got new powerful tools out there like Single Key. Single Key is actually based out of Toronto. Viller is a gentleman that started over there. I work quite closely with him. Give me 2 seconds. We'll play Xbox very soon. Okay, yeah, go find it. Take it upstairs. The pro tip though is I would always say you should be doing credit checks as part of your due diligence. Previous credit history is a very good indicator of future behavior. And I'm not just saying look at the credit score, but you actually want to look at the payment history of all the different financial products they've owned. And if they've treated those well, then chances are they'll pay you in time. What else can I say? You got me on the spot here. But I guess one point I want to emphasize too is with Landlord Credit Bureau, they're not new. They've been around for a while. They used to be part of TVS, Tenant Verification Services. And I saw the gentleman, he's still on that, Marv Stetner. He's a great gentleman as well, also retired law enforcement. But we've given a legal, bad, and good tenant list or way to manage it. And not only is it nationwide across Canada, it also includes the US. But it's our responsibility as landlords to start populating and using that database. It's only as good as the information provided. You could have the best process, but if no one's...
Oh, it froze again.
Oh, no.
Okay, finish that loud. You got to do that sentence.
Little landlord groups, I know they kind of keep these undesirable tenant lists, these black lists. But one thing, you're probably doing it kind of illegally. There's definitely a lot of gray area around it. But if we get this information populated into this national and international database, we can really reward good behavior and have karma get the ones that don't treat us well.
Exactly. If you look, like in Ontario, we pay $186 to $201 for an application. So when you see a yearly membership with Landlord Credit Bureau at $199, and then you're paying 60 cents per month per lease, it's minimum to what's going to happen. And you look at the savings that you're going to have, because we have to, obtain our legal representation to do multiple forms. We have multiple forms for utilities and damages and rent. You should see our forms. You got to keep on scrolling. So that's why my eyes were lighting up when you talk about, filling in the breaches. Tell us about all the breaches. And that's the part where it comes into play, knowing that you're holding them accountable. And the one thing that we have in Ontario is that sometimes we ask for a guarantor, and the landlord and tenant board here will not issue an order with the guarantor. So it's like, well, why do we have a guarantor? Well, I guess for small claims court trying to garnish their wages, but the benefit of it is that a guarantor can also be reported into Landlord Credit Bureau as well. So what I'm excited to talk about next with LCB, plus you have the concept of knowing what more features is coming out with. Oh, we lost him. I knew it was the internet. Let's see if he comes back in so he can say goodbye to you guys, because we're just finishing up here. Okay, he's back. Okay. I was like, did the kids get you? What happened?
Maybe there's a little bit of Netflix and some Disney Plus going on upstairs.
So my advice to everybody tonight is to continue to advocate. Even though we got products and services out there to now help us to better protect ourselves, to manage, you need to advocate, connect with your elected officials on all different aspects. I want to connect to the elected officials in Alberta to find out how they did how they did that up there. I want to see that. But I want to thank Mackenzie to bring in his knowledge, and I can't wait to have him and another guest, bring another person on with you next time as well. I want to get another landlord's take on what it's like in Alberta and try to guide our landlords how they can invest in Alberta as well. Mackenzie, send us off.
Yeah, thank you, Kayla, for your time. I enjoy having these conversations. I love talking to other landlords, learning best practices, and really just seeing the difference in the different jurisdictions. It's the first time I've done an out of Alberta conversation or live stream, so thank you for that. But yeah, for the folks that want to be part of our conversation over in Alberta, the easiest way would be go to the Facebook, search for Alberta Landlord Group. I also created a website now I think about it. It's albertalandlordgroup.ca. Will take us to the Facebook page. We have a mighty network, which is kind of where our conversation is going in the future. It's like a community platform, if you will. You can go to that at albertalandlordcommunity.ca. And then we're also on YouTube like you guys. So our YouTube channel and all of our content gets streamed there is over at Find Great Tenants. So tenants with an S.com.
That is awesome. That is awesome, guys. We'll get the links in all of the different posts. We'll put a nice post for everybody to kind of recap tonight. And if you are friends with any elected officials, share this YouTube video that's on our Ontario Landlords Watch page to your elected officials and let them know that Alberta is far better Residential Tenancy Act than Ontario. So Ontario, pull up your socks. You got a lot of work to do, because we need to be able to fix this in order to fix our housing crisis. I want to thank everyone for watching tonight. Mackenzie, thank you again. And until we do this again, happy renting.
My pleasure.